Areej is the founder of Women in Tech SEO, a global community connecting and amplifying women and marginalised genders in digital marketing. They've helped thousands of marketeers through mentorship, events, and networking. She is also a speaker and author, which is something I am so excited to dive into on this podcast. Hello, and a huge welcome to the podcast, Areej. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Thank you so much for coming. I love interviewing, people that I know, people that I don't know on this podcast, and you're someone I don't know that well. So I'm really excited to dive into all of the things, your tech career, the community that you've built, which, is something very similar to us. So yeah, just a huge thank you for joining me today and saying yes when I asked.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for having me.
So I want to start with the community stuff because I think it's always so interesting, being able to connect like that. And I know before that you were head of SEO at Papier and then Zoopla as well. At what point did you go, I want to start a community for people like myself?
Mm. Yeah, so I think, fairly early in my SEO career, it did feel difficult to find my people. So I would attend a lot of conferences and I specialize specifically in the technical SEO side of things. And the speaker lineups were always very much predominantly white male. And it was very discouraging for me because I didn't know if I would have space in like being able to take a speaking slot or so forth. So I always like to say that it was very selfish reasons. I just didn't feel that sense of belonging or sense of representation in my career. And so yeah, I think it was a few years in when I finally there was someone who took the stage. It was a brilliant, brilliant technical SEO talk, and it was one of the first women I see speaking like on a technical SEO topic. And then that inspired me to then pitch to speak as well. And yeah, it just made me realize, I looked around, I didn't find something like this. A lot of the groups that were around were very exclusive. They were for folks who were either agency leaders or public speakers or so on. But it didn't feel like there was anything that was welcoming for people who looked like me. And so that's kind of how I got the idea.
I love that. And I think saying that you did it for selfish reasons is totally fine because we're the same at codebar. We did it because we were tired of being the only women in our tech teams. And I think that really allows you to be able to create a space because you're doing it for yourself. You're creating a space that you would also want to go into. So I think
Mhm.
I think doing it for that reason is totally valid and also wonderful. You're not doing it because, you want money or you want this huge clout. There are so many reasons why people build things, and I think doing it for that reason I think is totally amazing. So at what point did at what point did it become your job? Because I know that's also quite a scary jump to
Mhm.
be in sometimes a comfortable job and then go, do you know what, I'm now going to take this and let it be my job. At what point did you go, do you know what, I'm going to do this now as my job?
Yeah, so I mean, we're turning 7 years this year, which is really, really exciting. And I started it back in 2019, and yeah, I was in a full-time role, and I think I probably didn't expect as many people to join and be interested. And initially, we were just running monthly meetups in London, so it was like fairly simple. And then I got the idea of, oh, how cool would it be to like do a full day conference? And I started planning that, and just the community kept growing and growing. And it was when I went on maternity leave, actually, was when I started thinking I wasn't too sure if financially it would make sense for me to like fully jump ship and do this full time. But I knew I needed to give it a lot more time and effort for it to grow and scale. And so I kind of like gave myself a deadline and said, let me try this until the end of the year. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll just go back to like an SEO role. And then it worked, and it worked really, really, really well. So it's been 4 years now of doing it full time. And I do not do SEO anymore, even though I run a community full of SEOs and marketers. And yeah, I probably never, when I first initially started it, because it was very much like a passion project and it took up all my evenings, all my weekends. But yeah, now it feels very, very fulfilling. And I just feel very grateful that I get to do this like as my full-time job now.
I hard relate to the doing it in your evenings and stuff. Like I was sat here like frantically nodding. So, got in-person events, I know you do virtual stuff and you also have these big events as well. And I know you're in multiple locations. Can you just talk us through, and I know you do like mentorship programs and stuff as well. Can you talk us through and tell, the people that are listening all the different things that you do so that we hear it correctly from you and not me?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we are a global community. We're predominantly on Slack. There's a little over 12,000 of us. Our digital space is very, very important. That's where, we host all of our virtual meetups and gatherings and WTS talks and webinars. And we run our mentorship program twice a year where we match mentors and mentees who help one another with leadership skills and career development. And then we then also have our in-person conferences. So last year we held those in London, Portland, Philadelphia, Berlin, and Melbourne, which was quite a lot. And yeah, we host those as like in-person conferences, like full day tracks, and get lots of our like partners and sponsors to join those as well. And then we have a lot of in-person meetups that happen purely curated from our community members who, just want to meet up their fellow members. So those are more like the social type of meetups that happen. And yeah, another thing that I'm really proud of is our knowledge hub. So we have our own online publication that we regularly update. And we have a wonderful head of content, Hannah Smith, who works as like the editor in chief and supports all of our writers. And I would say probably the thing that I pride ourselves most is so our community is completely free for our members. We want to make sure that we keep it, inclusive and accessible as possible. But also we pay our writers and we pay our speakers and to help amplify and support them for all their hard work. So we fully fund and monetize through our partner program.
That's so good. And I think, like you say, paying your speakers, paying your content, the people putting together the content. I think it's so good to be able to be setting that standard to say this is what we expect. And if we can do it, you can also do it, because we have it as well where people approach us wanting us to speak at conferences. And my response is, if we can do it as a charity, we can pay our speakers for Codebar Festival. You can pay us. Time isn't free. And so, yeah, I think it's so good to be setting that standard of what you want it's also what you want tech to be as well, which I think is so important. One of the things you do, which I've seen on your LinkedIn, which I really, really admire, is you always do a rundown of the finances afterwards, which I think is very what's the word? I can imagine it's quite scary, but also very important to show that. So what was the decision behind that to go, this is where we made the money? And I like that you break it down as well. This is from sponsorship, this is from tickets, and then here's what it cost us and here's the profit. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that before. So what was the idea behind that?
Yeah, I mean, so transparency of pricing is really important for us. So if anyone goes on our website, they can see right away, how much our digital partnership costs. We upload our full sponsorship packages on there. And I honestly think that worked really well for us because then our sponsors and partners know we're not making different deals with different people. Like this is exactly what it says on the website, and we're very transparent about how we do our pricing. And I think then the reason we've always shared what we do and what works and what doesn't work, because it isn't always, we do have some events or we have some financial years that don't go as planned, is I was really struggling to find a benchmark. I think communities that monetize in the way that we do, it's very hard to know what success looks like. And my hope with, transparently and opening that is for other folks to start doing that, or for people to at least start having more conversation around, well, how profitable or not profitable, has your event been, or where has the money come from? What do your expenses look like? We already do all of that in our financial planning. So there is something around, sharing that. It is that building in public culture and hopefully then again, very similar to ensuring that we pay our speakers and writers and so forth. It is almost like setting that standard off. More of us should be able to talk about this and share these numbers and benchmark against one another. I mean, in very, very simple terms, it is probably as simple as sharing salary ranges for, for jobs. The more people who do that, just the more transparent the industry would be. But also, I think there is something around, because our community, there would be no community without our wonderful members. And I feel like we owe it to our members, for them to know we are registered as a social enterprise. So, and actually around 80% of the money that comes in is then reused for our social mission. And so every year we publish exactly what we've done with the funding and what we're planning on doing the following year and so on. So it's just all a part of keeping ourselves accountable, but also, yeah, letting everyone know what we're working on and what direction we're headed into.
I think the like you say, the benchmark, as again someone who runs a community, when you put on an event, if you don't ever see that, you go, well, what's the norm? Like, what should I be charging for sponsorship? What should I be charging ticket prices? And like I said, I've never seen it done before. And I started following you, I think it was a few months ago. And when I saw you do it after one of the big events, I was like, that's amazing. But also just seeing the numbers also is just so useful to say, okay, like we're far from that or we're near that. Like you say, just that benchmark for other communities. And you say transparency as well, for the community. If someone goes and gives a bit of money to say, thank you for doing this, it's nice for them to then go, oh, this is where my money's gone. Like I can see this is what they're working on, rather than, like you say, not showing that and being really hidden. Actually, it probably allows for more money coming in, actually, for that. Like you say, that transparency is so key.
Yeah, and it is, I think it's also, it probably is a big part of what's like strengthened our relationship with our partners and sponsors as well. They do appreciate the honesty and the fact that it's when someone gets in touch with us and asks us, "Oh, we'd like to sponsor this." It's like, "Yeah, sure, here you go." The sponsorship package is literally on the landing page that everyone else views. So everyone knows, yeah, what they're getting and how much they're getting it for, and all of our exhibitors are, paying the same amount of money for the same spot and so forth. So yeah, I think it definitely helps in a number of ways, but also, and I'm sure you can relate to this, like building communities and like owning your own business. Like there is definitely, it can feel very lonely. And so there is a lot that comes out of, sharing, whether it's learnings or things that worked or things that didn't work, and sharing those publicly and then being able to have helpful conversations, with other folks who may be in the same boat.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm such a big advocate for sharing failures. I ran something at a codebar a couple of years ago and it's called a failure swap shop. And the idea is part of an unconference. So, there's no talks pre-planned. And yeah, it's called a failure swap shop. And the idea is that people are just sharing their failures. Because I think it's really important if you're entering the industry to know that people higher up still make mistakes. It's actually all part of learning. Like, no failure is a bad thing because actually often you learn from it. And so the idea behind this failure swap shop is you go, I'm Kim and I fucked up. And then everyone claps and then you share your failure. And like I say, it's just really demystifying, particularly if you're entering the industry, to go, do you know what? It's okay to make mistakes. Like it is all part of the learning. And yeah, as long as you learn from them, they are incredibly important failures.
Yeah, I love so much about that. And I can imagine like that's one of the things where it really helps community members come together as well. Like that's a very special way of connecting with each other, as opposed to,
Yeah.
because it is very, people are actually having conversation with one another, and yeah, there's this beautiful, like vulnerable sharing that's happening there, as opposed to, I don't know, jumping on a webinar and just hearing someone talk at you, and yeah, the connection really doesn't
Yeah.
happen there. So yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea.
It reminds me also of one of my very first, I'm going to call it failures in tech. I'd been a developer for a couple of months. I was quite fresh out of uni and my boss, and we were quite a small agency, there were six of us, and he trusted me to do a deployment. And I was
Mm.
like, are you sure? Like, I could screw this up. And he's like, no, 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 like, you've got this. Like, here's the documentation. And of course, I screwed it up, right?
Hmm.
Like, I can't remember what I did now because it was like 12 years ago. But and I remember just sitting there going, oh my God, like I've taken down the website, like I'm gonna get
Hmm.
fired. That's there where my brain immediately went, right? Like I'm gonna get fired. And I then remember saying to him, I was like, I went and tapped him on the shoulder and I was like, Sepas, I've screwed up the deployment. And he just looked at me and he just patted me on the back and he said, you're now a true developer because you've like
Yes.
screwed up a deployment. And it was almost
Oh, I
kind of
love
like,
that.
yeah, it was almost kind of like he wanted me
Mm.
like he was obviously trusting me as well, but he also knew that actually if she made a mistake, like it'll be okay and she'll learn from it. And you know what? I never made the mistake again. And
Yeah.
what I also did was the documentation wasn't 100%. So once we'd fixed it together,
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
then went and updated the documentation for the
Mm,
next person or for me the next time. And I think that failure, it taught me so much, but
mm,
the way it was also handled, like I said, that was 12 years ago, and I
but you
still
still
remember
remember
it.
it. Mm,
Yeah, and it's
yeah.
still a story that I tell people because it was
Mm.
so, when I think back of it now, it just feels so wholesome that
Yeah, of
like I
course.
literally got a pat on the back saying like,
Mm,
wow, you're a real developer now. Well done.
yeah. Yeah, what a massive difference that makes. And yeah, like that experience on its own. I think that's especially true with how easy it is for folks, and of course, especially women and people of marginalized gender, to be deterred in, the tech industry when things don't work out or so on. Like that reaction from your boss could have been completely different and could have deterred someone fully from, developing their career in tech or so forth. And yeah, what a massive difference that makes.
Yeah, and it also created this culture of mistakes are okay.
Of
And
course.
I think when you're also such a small company, you have to kind of own those mistakes and go, do you
Yeah.
know what, like, and you also need to be transparent with them because if you've made a
Hmm.
mistake, you need to fix it, whether
Yeah.
that's with the help from someone else or by yourself. And he obviously he was really trying to create this environment of it's a safe space. It's okay.
Yeah, I love
Like,
that.
and it was, yeah, like I say, it's been 12 years and I
Mm.
still remember it so vividly and
Oh, I love
tell the
that.
story probably 2 or 3 times a year, whether it's on
Mm.
like podcasts or just to people at codebar or,
Yes.
like I say, these failure swap shops, because, yeah, it was just wholesome.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to take you back a few years.
Mm.
Like you say, you haven't done SEO in a while now, but I kind of want to take you back to just before then. So,
Mm.
how did you get into that area of tech?
So I mean, I did a degree in computer engineering. This is back home when I was living in Egypt before I moved to the UK, and I really really enjoyed it. But I always thought of myself as a bad developer. Unfortunately, I had this idea that you're either a good developer or you're not a good developer. It's as simple as that. Like. And it doesn't, some people are just talented and some people are not talented at it. And of course, it was very, very high pressure. I mean, we were a class of 30 people. There were only four women. It was really, really high pressure. And even though like my grades were excellent, but I did struggle. It took me a long time. Just the logic behind coding was very difficult for me to always like grasp my head around it. And so when I moved to the UK, I did a master's in business information technology. And I started delving more into the world of digital marketing, business IT, things along those lines. And so my first role was in the technical SEO field in a really small agency. And the reason I love that is that it felt like it bridged that gap between tech and marketing. And so I was very, very comfortable with all because everything I already had a very technical mind, but then it wasn't as challenging to me as like the world of coding. And so that's what I kind of like, ended up, yeah, diving into. I would say for the longest time, I did have this regret of, oh, Areej, you should have been a developer, you should have been a coder, you would have been good at it. Like you gave up too quickly. But then the more time I spent in like the digital marketing world and SEO and stuff, the more I enjoyed it. And also, I don't even do any of that now. Now I'm like a community builder and event manager, which has nothing to do with anything that I did or studied. But yeah, and it is unfortunate because I know this is like a very, very common story for lots of people, and especially, yeah, women in like tech, even if they go through and have like a university degree in engineering and so forth, they might still feel like they're not talented at it.
Thank you for telling me that. I think every journey is like really interesting, like I say, and I think it's nice that you did find a path from it that you did enjoy. It's
Yeah.
sad that there's that bit of regret, but it's good to know that you found that path. And I think that's also why tech is so wonderful, because
Mm,
there are so many areas to tech that people can go into,
yes.
people that are designers, they're in tech,
Yes.
like you say, copywriters,
Hmm.
storytellers, I
Of
think of like
course. Mm,
gaming as an industry. How many
yeah.
different people are behind the storytelling for that? So it's good that you found that path that you you ended up enjoying.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even to this day, so our community is called Women in Tech SEO. And even though it's open, for all people of marginalized gender and it's open for all different disciplines of SEO and digital marketing, the name itself does deter folks who don't feel that they're technical enough to
Mm.
join. And it's like, no, that's exactly what I want to make sure it like does not happen to folks. It doesn't matter how experienced you are or how you're still in your very early days in within this industry. Like, everyone is more than welcome. Something we talk about a lot, and is very, very, I think one of the very first rules, community rules we put in place was, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And it came off the back of so many caveats. Every single question, oh, sorry if this is a stupid question, but and over time we just had to keep repeating it. I don't even have to be the one who repeats that anymore, because other community members jump in and say, by the way, there's no such thing as a stupid question. But yeah, it is unfortunate. It is very inherently just baked in so deep. And it'll probably take like a really, really long time for a lot, like the next generations, hopefully. I see how wonderfully confident my 4-year-old is. And I'm like, I wish I have her confidence. And I also hope that she continues to have this confidence for the rest of her life, and that like nothing, but yeah, that's kind of like my wish for all the wonderful community members and all the wonderful, like, brilliant folks in our industry. Like, please have the confidence of my 4-year-old.
Oh, that's so nice. And it's so nice to see, because like my little one is one. She's really like literally 1 2 weeks ago. And I can really kind of see her like starting to navigate the world, just like moving around, picking up certain toys.
Yeah,
So it's so wonderful that you see that confidence in your 4-year old, because you want that in them from a young
of
age,
course.
you really do, because the world can be tough.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, and it makes them yeah, it honestly makes a massive difference. And I do feel that's a lot of what we do all the time in the community. Like, there is a lot of like upping each other up, and we have a thing always where if a big group of us is going to attend just any industry conference, we let okay, who's speaking from our community members? And then we're like, okay, we're going to sit front row. And we're gonna, because of course people are nervous to take the stage. A lot of people might be doing it for the first time, or maybe not, but they're still feeling. And it does make a big difference to almost have like that support of your peers with you. So even if we're still, a lot of us are working on getting that from like within us, hopefully like the connections that we have with other community members can just really help like amplify that.
And it's why communities and networks are so important. There are so many people I speak to that confidence is often a blocker,
Yeah,
whether
of
it's
course.
starting a new career. I remember recently helping a friend learn to ride her bike. She's, mid
Mm,
30s like me. And even recently, I started going to a new gym class, and I was so nervous
of
beforehand
course.
because it's a new environment. You don't know
Mm,
anyone. For me, they'll also all be speaking French, which adds such an
hmm.
extra layer of like complexity for me, where like if I hear all this English, it's can kind of just like background noise out. But when it's French,
Yes.
I'm like, can I listen to that? Can I listen to that? And
Yes.
so yeah, confidence is it can be such a blocker. So it's, I think like you say, it's so important if that's such a big part of building these communities and bringing people up. It's one of my
Mm,
favorite things about codebar is like giving people the confidence to go on stage for the first time, or
yes.
not even necessarily going on stage, but just going to the event often is sometimes
Yeah,
such
of
a big
course.
thing. So you have you had your career in tech, and now, like you say, you're running the community full time, which is so exciting, and you're also an author. And
Hmm.
I can't let you go without talking about writing a book, because I think it's so. I haven't met many people who have written books, and I've heard it's such a long process. It's a
Mm.
hard process, but it's totally worth it. What gave you the idea for writing a book, or what made you want to write the book?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my idea, it was my publisher's idea. So I got contacted by a wonderful, yeah, publisher, Kogan Page, who had seen that I think I'd run a cohort of a community building course for community builders, and they'd come across that, and they got in touch and said, would you be interested in writing a book? We've been wanting that specific topic, community building for marketers and brands. And we saw the cohort that you're running and its structure, and we feel like that's exactly what we'd love to have in a book. And initially I thought it was like some scam email. And I had to like look them up and make sure this was an
Oh,
actual genuine thing, but it was.
really? Uh,
Because it's like that feels really like that's not the kind of outreach people tend to
yeah.
tend to get. But yeah, I am glad I said yes. It was the longest 9 months of my life. It was very, very, very difficult. I never thought it would be. There's just the amount of imposter syndrome that one goes through. Like the whole process is like, who am I to write this book? There are so many more experienced, knowledgeable folks to do it, and it was very, very difficult. It takes a long time to get to. Good friend of mine calls it the flow state. And once you get into that, you're good, you're sorted. But yeah, what really helped me was I think I approached it from the perspective of I'm going to share my experience and what I know and what's worked for me and what hasn't worked for me. And then I'm going to speak to a lot of other brilliant community builders and learn from them as well and have them share their expertise and like just bundle all of that in my book. And yeah, so I think it was its 1 year anniversary the other month, and it's called Community Building for Marketers, and I am very, very, very proud of it. I would never ever do it again because it was a lot of hard work. But I think what I feel proudest about is that I actually got it to the finish line, because there were so many points where I was this close to quitting. Like it was just consuming like just my entire headspace, and it was always this like massive weight on my shoulder of, oh no, I still have all of these words left to write and all of these chapters. And so yeah, once it was done, I remember the feeling of like pressing send on like the final manuscript, and just the relief was just. I For a while afterwards I was like, I don't even know what to do with my time anymore, because it took all of my time, all of my time.
Oh, and you answered one of my questions, because my next question was going to be, would you do it again? And
Never,
you've said nope,
ever.
never.
I always say one and done about two things. So my child, who is the absolute most brilliant child in the world, but she's definitely a one and done, not doing that again. And then writing a book, absolutely one and done. I
And you
cannot put
said
myself
nine
through that.
months to write the book, 9 months
Yes,
for pregnancy. Done.
exactly. That's it, done, sorted.
And what's the process of writing a book like? Because I know when I do a
Oh,
talk, I'm like pen paper. I sometimes, when I start to think of a talk, I'll like to sit in a coffee shop, like I say, with a notebook, pen paper, some highlighters, and then I kind of like develop it from there. But
yeah.
what's it like? What's the process of writing a book?
I think for me, I did fairly early on decide on, okay, these will be the sections, these will be the chapters, and then even within the chapters, these are the different things I had all of these beautiful, like that was the easy part for me, like all of the planning and all the bullet points, and that's exactly what I'm gonna cover. And then I want to feature 3 case studies, and these will be my case studies, and I'm gonna interview them, and then so all that stuff was like the really easy part for me, like all the research and everything. Probably because in many ways, like I call it me being procrastinating productively, because this is like the easy stuff to do. But then once it actually came to, okay, now I've done all the planning and research that I could possibly do, and I need to sit down and write, that was when it was like a complete blocker. But then, yeah, my wonderful, wonderful friend, Hannah Smith, who works with me on WTS as well, she gave me the best advice ever. And it was, Areej, you don't need to write the book. You can start by speaking it. And so she said, if you open an empty page, you're going to keep trying to edit as you write. But if you simply record yourself talking and then transcribe that, then it'll feel like an editing job. And that's literally how I ended up writing the entire book. So I would open like a chapter and I'd be like, okay, now I want to talk about, I don't know, the heading of events. And I would just talk, 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 talk. And then I would transcribe that, and then it would be like, oh, okay. And so then it felt like an editing job, and it felt like you were working with something as opposed to staring at a scary blank page. So yeah, that was the best writing advice I ever got.
That is so good. And I would never have thought to even do that process. And like you
Yeah,
say, rather than just I can imagine I think my mind would just go blank if I just had to look at this like blank document and just
yeah,
start typing. Whereas, yeah, I can imagine then going, do you know what, I'm gonna start because you've done the research and now just talk about the research and then like you say,
exactly.
and then edit it. And it sounds like
Yeah.
actually a more fun process as well than
Yeah.
like you say,
And
just
then you
type, type,
think
type,
of new
type.
things and you say, oh yeah, let's definitely, I can now add this section. I can do this. I can bring this. It
Yeah.
does. It's just far less overwhelming because you're working with something and you have something to actually work with, as opposed to just sitting there staring at like a blank page. And then you write a sentence and you're like, ugh, that sentence sounded awful. And then you go to rewrite it. And then but when you're like right now, I'm not thinking as I just talk. I'm just talking,
Yeah.
right? Like the words are just coming out. So yeah, that was just the absolute best advice ever.
And I guess if you're doing it that way, because I don't know how much it is the difference between, like, say, blogging and writing a
Mm,
book, but when I blog or write, write content for Codebar, I want it to sound like me. So, I
yeah.
don't always necessarily want it to be, I'm going to quote proper English because you kind of want it to have character. You want it to sound like you. So I guess actually, like you say, by speaking it like that, it's a
Yes.
bit more natural.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I would say my publisher was really good about that, where it did like the book definitely read like someone who knows me really well would probably read it in my voice.
Yeah.
And then all the other of course there was like editing phases and so forth where it was like okay, proper referencing is needed, actual indexing is needed, you have to quote this, you have to cite this. But a lot of what is shared, it does feel very much like very storytelling, very personal journey, very this worked, this didn't work, here's some things that I've tried, as opposed to it, because at the end of the day, it is a marketing business book. But yeah, I mean, I think for anyone who, holds a book and reads it, they depending on what people are looking for, I knew that I would never be able to write like something that's like purely academic, because
Yeah.
that's just it's not my style. But I am not a natural writer. Also, English is my second language, which does not help any of this.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Oh, I think, like I say, because I live in France, and like I say, I speak French, so I couldn't even imagine if I had to like write a whole book in French.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It's always, it's just,
And is there an audiobook version? Because I can imagine that's then like almost like you say you were writing it, but if you were to
yeah,
read
no.
like
So my
complete,
publisher doesn't do like audiobooks. I did ask them, but yeah, they
okay,
said, but yeah, it would be funny to do like a version of it sometime and just like
yeah,
sit there and read out my book. So that's a big secret, which is no longer a secret. I have never read my book. So after I sent that final manuscript, that was it for me. I was like, I have this thing, unfortunately, where I never watch a talk I did. This podcast, I will never ever listen to it. And I and I never read anything like I write. And so
yeah,
even after I got my actual like hard copy, I have never picked it up to read it, and I never will. I am terrified about what typo I will discover or something if I
yeah.
do that. And I'm like, okay, I trust people who read it, who say it's good, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I can only compare that to my dissertation at uni, where
Mm,
not, it's nowhere near writing a book, but I just remember once it was done, it was then gone. And I
yes,
like
that's
the
it. God.
idea of like reading it back now. I would like I said, I'd be absolutely terrified to like see a
Yes.
typo or go, Kim, why didn't I explain that bit better? Like, yeah,
Yes.
I wouldn't want to.
Exactly. I don't need this in my life.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've loved speaking you today, and I'll make sure that in the podcast description and the YouTube descriptions there are all these links so people can join the Women in Tech SEO group, your book,
Thank
so
you.
that and your own LinkedIn as well, so people can connect to you. And yeah, I've just loved chatting with you today, and finding out more about all these different areas. So just thank you so much for joining me today and sharing everything with us. Yeah, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. You too. Thanks.